After reading so many books on near-death experience or out-of-body experiences, I kind of thought to myself, I should maybe study what other things could be going on in the world, Yeah. What is there any connections of the cryptids or these creatures that are seen in UFOs to Bigfoot creatures, to Mothman, to all these other beings? Is there any connection of them being connected to hell? That's what we're going to have to explore. And that's what we're going to have to do. One of the convincers that can convince of near-death experience of the spirit world is that Jeffrey Long talked on how one person left their body in the operating room of the hospital, and they went into the cafeteria of the hospital and heard family members talking about them. And when they came back in their body, they could recall the events. He also talked about how sometimes people come out of their bodies and see on top of rooftops where they could never have, which would be impossible for them to know about that. So basically, in cardiac arrest, right, is that the heart stops beating, then which means that there's no more blood running into the brain anymore, which means there's no electrical activity in the brain, which means in the EEG machine it will show a flat line, person is completely brain dead, which means that the person should not be able to have dreams or hallucinations. But yet, during that time, they can have a very, very vivid experience of being outside of their bodies, And then if they get revived again, usually when they get revived again, they come back with an incredible story of being somewhere else. Now, some people might think to themselves, well, could this just be false memories? The only problem with that is that there would need to be an authority figure at every single hospital around the world using repetitive suggestions on patients on dying or people being revived, right, from being dead, and told that they've had a near-death experience over and over and over again in order to convince them that they had a near-death experience. So false memories doesn't explain that, because who's going to be around the world with millions of people trying to convince them that they had a near-death experience? So false memories doesn't cut it, And also, false memories usually have a small, they usually are to do with small gaps of a memory, right? Not entire stories, right? So this is one of the things that Jeffrey Long had to point out in his video, in his frequently asked questions. Now, basically, through Jeffrey Long's analysis of listening to so many testimonies of near-death experience, right, is that he has confirmed that there has to be an existence of hell. But he's only found 1%, but it's actually a bit higher. Elia Marzulli said it's actually up to about 5%. So most people are going into the ground and are being maybe tormented by demons and seeing other people under the earth being tormented by demons as well. And it's usually very dark. Sometimes they see fire, things like that, and agonizing pain and suffering. The other area that he's found is that most people find themselves going through a tunnel, and they see a light at the end of the tunnel, and then they pass through that light, and they usually end up in a beautiful land, and they usually maybe meet dead relatives that have passed on as well. The other location is the person might, if they're a Christian or whatever, they might just go straight to heaven. It just depends. But most of the cases is usually a tunnel. That's the highest percentage of near-death experience, is that they usually are going through a tunnel or going to some beautiful land that's unknown to them, that's unearthly, otherworldly, basically. And this is what we're going to have to explore, because I know that hell exists, but what is this? What could this be? I actually prayed to God to try and show me what could that tunnel be, because there's people that are Christians that are going through that tunnel to a beautiful land. But what is this beautiful land? What could be going on there? And that's what we're going to have to explore. So basically, in this book here, written by Brian Melvin, he basically just talks on what happened to him, that he had this experience of going somewhere else. He basically drinks some contaminated water because he was really hot, and he gets these stomach pains, and so he's poisoned because of what he drank, because it was contaminated water he drank. And he eventually went off to bed eventually. So basically what happens, I'll use my bed as a visual demonstration. In his bed, he's basically, because he's going through the pains and things like that, he eventually basically lies down on his bed, and he basically says that he pulls the blankets towards himself, and then from head to toe, and his dog is right beside him, and he's got his hand out and he's patting the dog, and then he says he thought he saw his hand go through the dog's chin, so that could have been his spirit. And then he eventually starts rising out of his own body, and he starts heading towards the ceiling. So basically he's floating up towards the ceiling, and eventually he ends up, his nose presses into the ceiling, and he can see the paint texture, and there's like type of fold in the paint texture from the painter, of course, and he's able to see in an area where there's a thumbprint there, but you can't see it from anywhere else in the room. So if you kind of get that in rough idea of just moving towards the ceiling outside of your own body, what it would be like, and you'd be able to see the texture in the paint. So that's what he was seeing, but you couldn't see it from anywhere else in the room unless you had a ladder that, when he was outside of his own body, and that's what convinced him that he definitely had to have left his body, because how could he have known about that thumbprint? So this is what convinced him that it can't have been a dream.